Good evening. I'd like to call our Town of Sydney regular council meeting for Monday, June 27th to order at 6 p.m. Good evening to members of council. We do have our colleague, Councillor Fallett, joining us via Zoom. You can't see her on the screen. Good evening, Councillor Fallett.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor.
And good evening to staff. Here in the council chamber, we may also have staff participate via Zoom, and you would see them on your screen at the time that they are speaking. And good evening to members of the public who are attending here in the chamber this evening, to those who may be watching the live web stream, and hello to those who may watch our recording of this meeting at a later date. I would like to acknowledge with respect that we're gathered this evening in the territory of the Wasanish Nations. We express our gratitude to be sharing these lands with Wasanish people. We respect the Wasanish people have been stewards of these lands and waters for millennia, and that we acknowledge our responsibility to continue to share in the stewardship of these lands together in a good way, and also to pursue our local government to their nation government reconciliation. I will turn to approval of the agenda, and there are 3 additional items since the agenda was published last Thursday. The first item that will be added is item 4, or will go under 4B1. It is a letter from representatives of local community organizations, and it will go under, it is with regards to the annual report, and will fall under that item on the agenda. The second is a letter of response from the Agricultural Land Commission, and that will go under 5A, which is the bylaw consideration of the official community plan. And the third is a letter from Doreen Hunter, also with regards to the official community plan, and will be considered part of the public hearing. I would look for a motion to approve the agenda as amended with those items, please.
I'll move the agenda be approved as amended.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor? All are in favor. Motion carries. Thank you. Just for clarification to members of the public attending, that we have 3 opportunities for public participation this evening. We'll begin in just a moment with our regular public participation period, where members of the public can come forward and speak up to 4 minutes on any topic in the community that is of interest or concern to them. We'll have a special public participation period. Following that, we will have a special public participation period on the 2021 Town of Sydney annual report. That is a statutory requirement that we hold a separate special public participation meeting for that. And after that concludes, we will conduct a public hearing for the consideration of our official community plan bylaw. So I will now ask if there are any speakers who wish to speak under general public participation. Please come forward and provide us with your name and address. Please come forward, sir. There is just a button you'll see at the bottom of the microphone there, and you'll see a red light come on, which activates.
There you go. I haven't had the opportunity to speak to this council. I've been speaking to other ones, but not this one. But anyway, hope everything goes well. And I'll read most of mine so we don't lab too much, okay? My name is John Tapio. I live at 9496 Lockside Drive. And last November the 15th at 9496 and 9498, we experienced Sydney sewer coming into our basement via the sewer shower and the toilet. I phoned Sydney. The spokesman here stated that the pumps couldn't handle the volume, and we're on the connection that comes from West Sydney, and we're down there. I don't know if we're the only 2 on that connection or not. I have no idea, but I know it goes into the pump station. Okay, I met with Sydney's engineer some time ago, in December, I think it was. She explained that the problem with the groundwater infiltration into the sewer system. I also spoke to GVRD Waste Management. He stated that the pumps, their pumps, CRD pumps, and their sewer plant could not handle the volume. I've got your engineer's report here. And she reported that referred to the X connection, the cross connections and so on, and the town's sewer pumps ran at full capacity, seems to run well. Anyway, and I also mentioned in that system there that there was this was a 100-year event. Well, let me tell you, that this is not the end of these. These are going to happen more often, as we all know, climate change and everything else. You refer to the glacier at Glacier Bay in Alaska. That's been receding back for 200 years, so this isn't going to stop. My concern is that there was no mention regarding the CRD pumps treatment system was a failure. It couldn't clean out your pump house, and they admitted that they couldn't do it. Yet, I spoke to the mayor, McNeil-Smith. Also, you're also a CRD rep, I believe. Anyway, regarding this event, his views were similar to the engineer's report. No mention the CRD could be at fault. Now, wouldn't it be helpful if the CRD was approached to increase their pump plant capacity to move sewage from Sydney to eliminate the backup in the Sydney sewer system? And for us, nothing's changed. The same thing could happen tomorrow or after the next big great rain, because nothing's changed. Connected the same old sewer, and if it doesn't clean out, we're in the same business. I don't know what it costs, but it costs $30,000 for furniture, probably $100 and some odd thousand for working in the basement. 6 months putting up with this stuff with people with masks in and out, and I don't particularly want to go through it again. I did inquire about putting a check valve in the system, and it was recommended from here that it probably wasn't worthwhile. So anyway, so be it. So I just hope you take it up with CRD to make sure that they get the sewer out of your system at least. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tapio. I appreciate you coming in person to address council. I appreciate the opportunity we had to speak by phone last week, and that we do have a storm management plan that will take some time to put into effect. And I appreciate that if a similar event was to happen now, you would be in a similar situation. But it does take some study and pursuing particular actions, not only in the neighborhood that you live in, but stormwater management in other areas that are affected in the municipality. And with myself and Councillor Fallot as representatives to the CRD Water and Wastewater Commissions, we will certainly keep in touch with that commission with regards to your concerns.
Okay, thanks.
I'll call if there are any other speakers for general public participation this evening. Seeing none, I'll close public participation, and we'll turn to the special public participation opportunity regarding our 2021 annual report. Would anyone like to come forward on that, please? Good evening, Mr. Carlsen.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, my name is Dennis Carlsen. I'm here tonight as a representative of the Sydney Community Association, but I'm also representing the other community groups that were included in the submission to council regarding the 2021 annual report. When we reviewed that report, there was a couple of things that we noted. Neither the highlights from last year or the initiatives proposed for next year identified any recommendation from the Parks Master Plan or the Urban Forest strategy. The Parks Master Plan, which I believe was adopted in 2018, and the Urban Forest Strategy, which I believe was adopted a year later, both include a set of recommendations. Some were identified as high priority. And I should say that we recognize that council needs to weigh staff resources and budget implications when considering new initiatives. However, I should point out that there are a number of policies in the new OCP, which you're going to hear about tonight and consider tonight, which are dependent on the implementation of the recommendation in the Parks Master Plan and the urban forest strategy. So we would expect that these recommendations that are in these documents be top of mind for both staff and council. Accordingly, we are requesting that the high priority recommendations contained in the Parks Master Plan and the Urban Forest Strategy be considered in the 2023 budget, and also request that council direct staff to provide a staff status report to the public regarding the implementation of the recommendation in these plans. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carlsen. I will now turn to, I will ask if there are any other speakers regarding the 2021 annual report. Seeing none, I will close that section of participation, and we will go to our public hearing this evening. I would like to begin by reading a brief statement about how we conduct a public hearing. I'll then ask Mr. Humble to read the public hearing notice, and then I will then open the floor to speakers. Public hearings are a statutory requirement under the Local Government Act for changes to the official community plan and/or zoning amendment applications. Tonight's public hearing is being held because Council is considering comprehensive changes to the town's official community plan. Public hearings are an opportunity for any person who believes their interest is affected to present their views and to be heard or to provide written submissions. There is no limit on the length of time a person may speak, and a person may speak more than once if they wish. Council welcomes input from speakers, and our role during the public hearing is to listen, have an open mind, and when the speaker is finished, to ask possibly questions for clarification. Our role is not to challenge speakers on what they say and not to debate with speakers on their points. Written submissions have been copied and circulated to Council. We will not read them aloud this evening. Letter writers may read their submissions, but with the knowledge that Council has received and read them. Once the public hearing is closed, Council must not receive any additional information other than to clarify issues raised during the public hearing. And then Council will then deliberate and make a decision under the bylaws section of the agenda, which will immediately follow the public hearing. I'd now like to ask our Chief Administrative Officer, Mr. Humble, to please read the public hearing notice.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this is the notice of public hearing for Official Community Plan Bylaw number 2240. And it reads as follows. The Council of Town of Sydney will hold a public hearing on Monday, June 27th, 2022 at 6 p.m. at the Town Hall to allow the public to make a verbal or written representation to Council with respect to a proposed Official Community Plan Bylaw number 2240. The OCP is a town bylaw that will set broad objectives and policies to guide decisions on planning, land use, and the provision of municipal services in the community over the next 20 years. The OCP bylaw and supporting documents can be inspected on the town's website or in person at the Town Hall. Community members can participate in the public hearing in person at the Town Hall or electronically via Zoom. Written comments could be submitted until 4 p.m. today, and this was advertised, first advertised on June 16th and second advertised on June 23rd. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Humble. I will now open the public hearing. We've received 5 written submissions that were included in the agenda package posted on our website last Thursday. We've received an additional written submission, as I mentioned during the agenda review. And Council has received and had the opportunity to review all of these submissions. We do have a speaker who will address Council in the public hearing participating via Zoom. I will turn to that person first and then come back to those in the chamber. And so I would invite Ms. Mariah O'Brien to please confirm your connection. Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you, Mayor. Can you hear me?
We can hear you well. Please, you have the floor.
I hear you well. Okay. My name is Mariah Louise O'Brien, and I live at 103, in Unit 103, 2311 Mills Road. I'm reading my talk. Okay. I appreciate this opportunity to speak to the Mayor and Council concerning the needs of the over 85 demographic in Sydney. For this presentation, I have coined the term senior, because the needs of the over 85 population differ from what is typically referred to as senior, a person over the age of 65. This brief presentation is further to my written submission to the Mayor and Council on June 13th, 2022. As a context, I begin with some quotes from Statistics Canada report, a portrait of Canada's growing population aged 85 and older from the 2021 census. Quote, the number of persons aged 85 and older has doubled since 2001, reaching 861,000 in 2021. According to population projections, this number could triple by 2046, which time frame parallels Sydney's current planning period. The report states, differences in the proportions of older Canadians are important since these populations have specific needs such as security, transportation, and access to home and healthcare services. And to Stats Canada list, I have personally added physical fitness opportunities. People age 85 and older make up more than 9% of the population in only 3 Canadian municipalities. They are in British Columbia, on southern Vancouver Island. They include Sydney, Duncan, and Qualicum Beach. These places are known for their temperate climates, which draw people in their retirement years. They also have high proportions of people over age 65 and who come with their pensions and retirement savings. They bring wealth to Sydney. In 2021, the total population of Sydney was 12,320. Of that population, 1,150 people were over 85, which represents 9.3% of Sydney's population, the highest percentage of senior residents in any community in Canada. I asked to speak about the senior demographic in this forum because I believe its needs are not adequately considered in the current draft of the OCP, and that elements of the original draft presented by the planners to the Mayor and Council in February contained provisions that would have benefited seniors more. They unfortunately have been removed from the draft being presented to the community today. 3 examples are secondary suite coach house initiatives. The first draft of the language was introduce legislation. In the current draft, the language is consider introducing legislation. In other words, it doesn't have to happen, the legislation. Another point is community gardens. The language was changed from establish community gardens to encourage community gardens. Again, removing from the municipality a requirement to take action. Multi-unit residential and neighborhood commercial zoning, which would have allowed residents in all of Sydney's neighborhoods to be able to easily access nearby commercial services that meet some of their daily needs, have also been reduced or eliminated. A local restaurant, a convenience store, a cafe around the corner, or a community garden would provide seniors residents both exercise and opportunities for a morning coffee with friends, all within easy walking distance of their housing. When I was a young person, people in their 60s were thought of as old. The last 2 US presidents have been in their 70s. Society has new norms for aging. Many seniors still have productive time, albeit often fewer hours per day. Care homes and full-time service housing should not be seniors' only choices. They are needed, particularly in the light of currently unsolved curse of dementia, but they should not be the only alternatives between home condo ownership and suitable living spaces. In conclusion, I believe the existing demographic of Sydney provides municipal politicians and planners the opportunity and the responsibility to lead the way for municipal planning in Canada. that will create the best possible community environment for senior population. But that is not, unfortunately, in the draft being presented to the community tonight. Perhaps the mayor and council would agree to establish a committee empowered to look in detail at a wide range of the needs of senior population and empower it to make recommendations for adjustment to this OCP during the 20-year span. Sincerely, and thank you for listening.
Thank you, Ms. O'Brien. We appreciate you coming before council this evening and your considered remarks. And I think we will speak to some of those when we come to it on the agenda. Thank you again.
Thank you.
I'll now turn to those in the chamber. If anyone was wishing to come forward to please approach the microphone and provide your name and address, please. I'll call for a second time if anyone wishes to come forward to address council on our official community plan bylaw number 2240. And for a third time, I will call for any speakers. Thank you. I will, with no further speakers, I'll now close the public hearing. And I will now turn to item 5A on the agenda, the official community plan bylaw number 2240. Council, we can proceed by putting forward any amendments to the bylaw or to proceed with a motion to give third reading. After third reading, we can proceed with a motion to adopt the bylaw. I will turn to council. Councillor Rintoul.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Unless colleagues have some further discussion, I'm happy to move third reading of official community plan bylaw number 2240.
I'll just pause for a moment. Councillor Rintoul, if there are any councillors wishing to bring forward. Councillor Wainwright.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm actually picking up on the late item from the Agricultural Land Commission, and they have suggested that we include in the OCP a map identifying the parcels of ALR within the town of Sydney. And I guess my question, this doesn't seem like an unreasonable thing to do. It's not a land use change of any type, but it would be a late change. And I guess, and I would not want to propose that change if it's going to trigger the need for another public hearing. So through you to staff, is it possible at this stage to ask for an amendment to the parks and open space map to hatch the 3 parcels of ALR to identify them?
Thank you. Mr. Humble.
Through the mayor to Councillor Wainwright, indeed it is possible. It's not a alteration of land use or density, so it is would be considered a relatively minor revision and a relatively easy map change if that is the direction of council to go that way. From a staff perspective, we did discuss it. We don't necessarily feel it's absolutely necessary, given that it's 3 areas on properties, whether it's the VA, the town, or the school district. We're all aware of those lands. However, if council wants to proceed in that direction, we're happy to make that change. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Humble. Councillor Wainwright.
Thank you, Mayor. Because we've had the request from an external agency, and it is a minor request, it seems to me reasonable to propose that. So I'd like to make that motion.
Do we have a second? Moved by Councillor Wainwright, seconded by Councillor Fallett. Did you wish to moderate further, Councillor Wainwright?
I think I've already explained it during my question.
Certainly. Councillor Fallett, would
Thank you. I'll just echo Councillor Wainwright's comments, and I'm pleased that he did bring it forward. I think it's something that should be within the maps of our OCP, so I'm pleased to support this motion coming forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further speakers? Councillor O'Keefe.
Just a question in regards to some correspondence from Mr. Piquet, and there was some mention there about.
Councillor O'Keefe, we have a motion on the floor.
Sorry.
If you want to speak to the motion.
No.
at this time?
Oh, no.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
We'll come back to you. No problem. Okay, seeing no further speakers on this item, I'll call the question. All in favor? None opposed. The motion carries unanimous. Thank you. Councilor Wainwright?
That's it for me.
Thank you. I'll turn to Councilor Garnett. Well, you had your hand up, so.
Yeah. I've struggled the last few days because I'm still really troubled by Schedule B, and where it was a standalone document before, we're now being asked to include it in the OCP with Schedule A. I don't have a lot of issues with Schedule A per se, but Schedule B I do. And I want to move recommendations, but these will be changes that will alter everything. So I'm in a loop here. I'm really struggled with this for a while, and but I just can't. I just feel like the document disregards the neighbors that live there in the Galaran neighborhood, and I feel like what's proposed in including this, I just can't live with as an overall document. So I don't know. Should I move motions to make changes?
Well,
if they're
that is
defeated?
certainly with, your decision to make. I just want to clarify one comment at the outset, and it's just a clarification.
Sure.
Is you made reference to it now being included.
Mm-hmm.
West Lap, Schedule B, is part of the current official community plan. It was approved by a previous council as an amendment to the official community plan. I would turn to staff when that occurred. It was in a previous term, but that's just a clarification.
2017 sometime.
2017.
Yep.
Thank you.
So if I'm having troubles, sorry, through you to staff, if I have issues with what's in that document, and I'd like to see things changed that are presently in there, that would, in all likelihood, trigger a public hearing, because that would, what I'm speaking to changes to stories, which would change those parameters, correct?
So if I could turn to Mr. Humble or Mr. Newcomb, who did touch briefly on changes when, with Councillor Wainwright's question, if perhaps could flesh out a little bit about what specific changes would trigger us taking a step back on the OCP.
Yeah, the legislation, thank you, Mr. Mayor. The legislation is fairly clear with respect to what the procedures are after a public hearing in terms of potential amendments associated with an OCP, and it's under Section 470 of the Local Government Act. And it reads that after a public hearing, the council may, without further notice or hearing, adopt or defeat the bylaw, or alter and then adopt the bylaw, provided that the alteration does not do any of the following: alter the use, increase the density, or without the owner's consent, decrease the density of any area from that originally specified in the bylaw, or alter the bylaw in relation to residential rental tenure in any area. So it's fairly prescriptive when it comes to those specific items, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Humble, and I did note that it is either an increase in density or a reduction in density. So
Yeah.
if any of the items you're considering. And so, Councillor, I can suggest it's your decision, but if you put a motion on the floor and it passes by council, then that would trigger rescinding and calling for a new public hearing. But I'll leave it to your decision if you want to do that and hear from your colleagues.
Yeah, I as much as I've struggled with it, I feel like it's something I need to do. So I'm going to stand behind the fact that I've never been comfortable with what's proposed in here. And I wasn't on council the day. I wouldn't have supported it had I been, but this is my opportunity. I'm not sure if I should do these just all at once or individually, or what would be your preferred?
I would suggest that if you have a specific one to start, and if there are several, I don't think that's an issue, but we would deal with them one at a time.
So under 5.3.4 of the West Side Local Area Plan.
Okay.
And
If
I
you
know
could
this
perhaps
was-
just give us a minute to
Yeah.
possibly reference that.
It's on page 25.
Could Could you just repeat that number, please?
5.3.4.
Okay. Please go ahead, Councillor.
Yeah, I realize this went, was something that was added last meeting, but I would move that the, would read, provide residential uses at a scale of between 1 and 5 stories, as per table 1.
Okay, do our colleagues,
I'll second that.
okay, for discussion, I'll turn to Councillor Garnett, the mover.
And it'll speak to table, I want to speak to table 1 as well, but I mean, it sort of goes together. As far as the mixed use component, I'm really struggling with having 5 stories potentially mid-block in that area, knowing how small it is and what kind of impact that's going to have on neighbors whose properties aren't sold in terms of lot lines and impinging on their ability just to live in the neighborhood. And ostensibly, I feel like moving them out of the neighborhood because they won't feel, they'll have their privacy levels impacted and everything else. And as far as the west side residential, or what we call now multi-unit residential, I have a real problem with 6 stories at the end of each of those streets: Henry, Airedale, James White Boulevard, Skylark, Jean, and even Beacon Avenue West. Just from a perspective along the Pat Bay Highway, having potentially 6 stories all along there is a problem for me, and up Beacon Avenue West. And I know from a safety perspective, it would have to go to Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure to comment on if anything was to come there, but it's just too much in massing for me, and I just can't get over how that's going to impact the people that live there now, even if it's done one at a time. And we've stressed in there from the north, from Galaran, Beacon Avenue West, and Henry. I just feel like the people who live in that neighborhood are just not being, this puts them in really bad position as it starts to be developed. And I'm not comfortable having these size of buildings have that kind of impact on people that have lived there for decades in some cases. And this is why I'm bringing the motion forward.
Thank you, Councillor Garnett. I'll turn to the seconder, Councillor Fallett.
Thank you very much. I can support this motion. The reality of the building heights and the impact into the neighborhood was brought home a few weeks back when we had a proposal for the northwest corner of Beacon and Highway 17. And I looked at the area both from the highway side and then also from the neighborhood street. And then I imagine 1 to 6 stories being elsewhere within this neighborhood. And certainly mid-block, as Councillor Garnett was just talking to. I think it's overwhelming. I think it's too much for the neighborhood. And we had the opportunity a couple of years ago to include this in our the West Slap in our OCP review, and we chose at the time not to do it. I think in hindsight, that wasn't our best decision. I wish that we had included it, but I'm pleased to support this motion, and I hope that council will give it the appropriate consideration and support this as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fallett. I'll turn to Councillor Wainwright.
Thank you, Mayor. So I'm not going to be supporting this motion. And we've gone through an 18-month process getting to where we are with the OCP. And in the early days of it, council had a discussion about the approach. And one of the key questions that was asked to us was whether we wanted to do a complete review, as in reopen the West Side Local Area Plan. And the reason that was important was that if we were going to do that, we would have to make sure that the public engagement process dealt with that and told people that we were reopening it and reconsidering everything and making sure that people had an opportunity to weigh in on it. So it would have cost more, probably. It might have taken a bit more time. But in the early days of planning, we had a discussion, this council had a discussion about it, and one of the points that was made to us was that the process that the West Side Local Area Plan went through was a very robust public engagement and actually had one of the highest levels of public participation of any process that the town had undertaken up to that point. So felt pretty good that people had a chance to weigh in on it. So council decided that we weren't going to do that. And when time came to write the terms of reference for hiring the consultant, we did not include reopening the West Side Local Area Plan and the level of engagement that would have been involved in it. We chose, that was our second opportunity. We had the discussion, we decided not to do it. So we've gone through the process and we have had a lot of public engagement on this. Like we've had hundreds of people weighing in on the OCP, telling us all the various aspects they care about. So, you know, we've got to where we are now, and it's not simply a matter of, oh, let's back up and do a public hearing on a new OCP. It's let's go back to the process that we need to do if we're going to reopen the West Side Local Area Plan and spend I think it was about 6 months back then to do that process. And then after we finished, we'll think about an OCP public hearing. So, no, I'm not prepared to do that at all. Sorry. I will point out that the OCP is not a green light to anything. Like, there's nothing in the Galaran area that can be done under the new OCP that does not need a rezoning. So there will be public hearing and process for the new council to look at. And if they don't like the height, they don't have to approve a rezoning to that maximum height. But to say now, let's pull the plug on the public hearing and restart the clock and do this again, sorry, I'm not prepared to waste that kind of money. So I'm not going to support this at all.
Thank you, Councillor Wainwright. I'll turn to Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you, Mayor. I might have supported this if I had heard more from the people on the west side, that there was issues for them. But after 18 months, I don't recall receiving any feedback from them that there was significant issues with the implementation of the plan. You know, we did have some people come forward when there was that proposal at the corner of Beacon West and the highway and express concerns about height and that sort of thing. And I myself did have some concerns about the multi-use that was at the end of those cul-de-sacs, and we did have quite a robust discussion on that. And I was happy with, I think it was, I believe it was Councillor Wainwright made an amendment that we incorporated that would guide us in terms of how development would take place. So it was going to be from the periphery, not in the middle of the block. So I was happy. I was happy with that. And as mentioned, you know, we still have the opportunity to restrict the height on things if we choose to do so in the zoning bylaw. So thank you.
Thank you. I'll turn to Councillor Duncan.
Thank you. I won't be supporting this for the same reason Councillors Wainwright and Councillors O'Keefe have already stated so well. I think to that I would just add and kind of reiterate what Councillor O'Keefe began, was that because of the way we already knew this was going to be building from the outside in, and we know that for the past 5 years, I mean, a proposal came through that didn't fit the neighborhood because it wasn't on those edges and moving in, and we turned it down, that the odds that in the next, 20 years, the same sort of thing wouldn't happen and wouldn't be taking a lot longer than this time scale of this existing plan in order to even get to the inside where the highest buildings are is very unlikely. particularly since I think we all read the news and we know what the next 20 years are likely to be like. And I don't think being concerned about having enough materials or the finances to build 6 stories is going to be a problem. So I'm not concerned about holding this back and spending more time and town money on this at this point.
Thank you, Councillor Duncan. Councillor Rintoul?
Thank you, Mayor. And likewise, I won't support the motion. In keeping with the comments of my colleagues, I think in part by design in the process and council having addressed early Westlap and slated it for inclusion, for continued inclusion in the OCP, that we didn't see a lot of feedback certainly on this as being a concern. On the contrary, I think what we've seen and quite recently from the likes of the Chamber of Commerce, for example, is addressing that need for some density and housing. And this is certainly an area where it makes sense to see that type of increased density in its proximity to high-paying industrial jobs that are in that location. And so I'll leave my comments there, and I won't intend to support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rintoul. I won't support the motion, and just speak briefly that with regards to the comments on process, we have had ample opportunity as a council, but also if we had heard from the community on this item. Sorry, Councillor Fallot, did you have your hand? No. Okay, sorry. Councillor Garnett.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple of comments. One, I don't think we can assume because the people in that neighborhood haven't contacted us that they're in approval of it. I think silence doesn't speak to affirmative. Two, I also think that I understand where Councillor Wainwright's talking about process, but doesn't necessarily mean I've pretty much always been opposition to this. I've been pretty consistent from the get-go. I think that, and as far as the chamber and providing housing for high-paying jobs in the west side, that's awesome, but that does nothing to help our service in small business in downtown Sydney. So I'm not sure where that lands me as also a negative for me in terms of this. The whole way this has gone down in this particular neighborhood, and I have heard from people who live there who are not happy with it. I'm sure maybe the rest of council hasn't, but I worked in that area, so I talked to people, and I have heard comments from people that they're not happy with it. Whether they bring it to council during this process is another thing altogether. So I feel like I told them I would support them, and I'm doing that in what I'm putting forward here. And if council doesn't see value in it, that's their prerogative. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Garnett. Seeing no further speakers, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? We have Councillor Duncan, myself, Councillor Wainwright, Councillor O'Keefe, and Councillor Rintoul opposed. The motion is defeated. Did you wish to continue, Councillor Garnett? Thank you. Are there any other items before going to third reading that council would like to raise? Councillor O'Keefe?
Thank you. I was just reading the letter, as I mentioned earlier, from Mr. Piquet, and concerned about preserving our commercial ground floor. And I guess a question through you to staff is that something that we can accomplish through the zoning bylaw to protect that degradation of commercial space of ground level downtown?
Mr. Newcomb.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, through the mayor to Councillor O'Keefe. Certainly council can adopt a zoning bylaw that could theoretically restrict the uses in the downtown to only commercial and require properties in the downtown to be commercial up to the third or fourth story that's permitted, or any variation in between. So yeah, the zoning bylaw is the place to sort of drill down into the details there and decide what level of residential versus commercial density is appropriate in council's eyes for those properties.
Okay, that's good. I think it's something worthwhile considering. So if we can do that in the zoning bylaw without delaying this, that's fine.
Thank you for bringing that forward, Councillor. I'll turn to Councillor Wainwright.
Thank you, Mayor, and also I'll thank my colleague for bringing that forward. During the question and discussion, the one thing I think was missing for the audience was the nature of Mr. Piquet's concern. And what he was saying in his letter is that he's observed from the development of commercial properties downtown that when they redevelop, there winds up being a lot less commercial space because the commercial space is less valuable than the residential, and they often need some of the land for parking, and they need some of the land for access to the upper stories, and at the end of the day, when it redevelops, there's a lot less commercial. So he was expressing concern that we should think about protecting the amount of commercial and consider whatever we can to maximize the amount of commercial on that ground floor. So thank you for bringing it up, and I hope the next council considers it during the zoning bylaw.
Thank you, Councillor Ray. No, I was going to echo your last comment in terms of we would consider those aspects at that time. Councillor O'Keefe?
Thank you, Mayor. Just a question in regards to things like that, and maybe it has to do with implementation of things. But is something like that, you know, council members are going to have to make a note of somewhere and remind ourselves to bring that up? Or is that something, question through you to staff, is staff making note of these things, and would they bring those things back to us when we go to consider the zoning bylaw?
Through the mayor to Councillor O'Keefe, I mean, staff can certainly take note of these things. I think if council really wants to, you know, send a very direct message about something, it should be done through resolution.
Okay.
And then it's clear. I know there were items in the OCP before we proceeded with respect to the review, which council made a very clear, gave clear direction to staff through resolution. We want this considered as part of the OCP review. So I think it'd be helpful just to have that. I mean, as I said, staff can certainly make notes and do our best to remember and bring those things forward. But if council wants to guarantee that it comes forward, it should be done through resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Humble. I'll just ask a question. Would it be appropriate to, I appreciate we know that following adoption of the OCP, that staff will begin a process to review the zoning bylaw. That will take several months. It's a process. It will involve public engagement, and it will involve a public hearing. But would it be appropriate to refer this correspondence to the review of the zoning bylaw?
I would perhaps suggest, Mr. Mayor, that what I anticipate happening in terms of the process for undertaking a review of the zoning bylaw following the adoption of the OCP is that staff would take a bit of time to reflect on the new OCP and bring forward what would essentially be an approach report, I guess, that would outline the time frame, the process, the legislative requirements associated with a review of the zoning bylaw. And in that, I think they would also touch upon what might be deemed some of the more critical elements, areas for potential review based on the newly adopted OCP. So certainly council could do it now, but that might be a more appropriate time as we bring forward that approach report. I'm not sure if Mr. Newcomb wants to comment on that, but that would be sort of my take.
Thank you, Mr. Humble.
I guess just to add that certainly in each land use and the downtown in particular, issues like that are well known to planning staff, and the intent is, I think, to bring forward those sort of more weighty considerations as the zoning bylaw update process evolves, and have a good discussion through council in what approach to take. So it would partially be an approach report, but also following that process, getting into the details. And I guess just to say that in every type of land use within the town, there's a raft of issues that I think planning staff are well aware of, and that's certainly one of them, and we would bring forward those sort of sets of issues for council's consideration as each land use is considered in that process.
Okay, so I gather through you, back to staff, so I gather from that, maybe we don't need to make a recommendation, that you seem to be on it, and so a resolution is not really required then?
Yeah,
Okay.
saying we're on it is a
Okay.
bit too short, but that's what I meant, yes.
Okay, okay.
Thank you, and if I could comment, I share the concern, and I'm pleased Mr. Burkett brought it forward. It has been a discussion point in various ways. I think the current draft OCP clearly speaks to the need to preserve commercial lands, and there are 3 sections: the downtown, the West Sydney commercial, and Marine Harbor, Harbor Road Marine industrial. In all 3 of those sections, it speaks to preserving the commercial space in those respective business districts. And in particular, we had significant discussion, council did, based on community feedback, and we removed the use, live-work use on ground floor from the initial draft of the OCP, as well as ground floor residential. And I think the detail that will be needed going forward in terms of policy really speaks to the points that Councillor O'Keefe and Councillor Wainwright brought up, is that if a significant parcel of downtown commercial land is redeveloped into mixed use, there are some residential uses that have to occur on the ground floor: a foyer, an elevator, stairwell, and so forth. Perhaps there, could be decisions about the amount of parking that's permitted or what have you. So I think that level of detail is appropriate in the zoning bylaw, and that we do have a good policy in the OCP to address preserving commercial in all of our business districts. Go ahead, Councillor O'Keefe, and then I'll turn to Councillor Fallot.
Okay, I'm just, another question through you back to staff in regards to that approach, a report that was mentioned. So would that be, would that just be for the zoning bylaw, or would it also incorporate the different policies or other things in the OCP that we want to do? Like, is that kind of our implementation strategy in terms of going through the OCP to say, here's all the zoning bylaw things that we have to do, and here's all the other things? I noticed some municipalities have timelines identified in terms of short, medium, and long-term. So is that what we would see in an approach report?
I'll turn to Mr. Hummel.
Through the mayor to Councillor O'Keefe. No, I don't. I think that the approach report would be specific to the zoning bylaw review. I think that we've discussed, I think previously, there's been some discussions about implementation approaches with respect to the OCP, and I think at least I think what I've heard is that we aren't moving in the direction of a specific implementation plan for the OCP. That really, this is a living document that is taken into consideration when we're bringing forward items for council's consideration as part of annual strategic planning and the budget process, etc. It's a document, obviously, that we use on a regular basis when we're looking at developing policy or reviewing development applications, etc. So I don't see us bringing sort of a specific implementation plan forward, certainly not as a part of an approach report for the zoning bylaw.
Thank you, Mr. Humble. I might just add, I mean, the specific item that's been raised in terms of the piece of correspondence has relevance to the zoning bylaw that will be reviewed after the OCP is adopted. And whichever plan, whether it's the zone or bylaw, whether it's the zoning bylaw, whether it's the parks master plan, whether it's the climate action plan, whether it's the active transportation plan, the policies that we have in the OCP will inform how we proceed to amend and implement those plans.
Okay.
Did you wish to continue, Councillor Keith?
Uh,
I do have Councillor Fellett.
Yeah, no, I think it's something maybe we could give more consideration with as you say, at strategic planning, if there's specific things in there that we want to move forward. So I think that's maybe the route to go. I think it is used, I've looked at some implementation plans from other municipalities around the CRD, and I think there's some value to kind of taking a second look and pulling the things out of there that we want to make sure happen. So if strategic planning is a place, that's good. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Fellett.
Thank you very much. And I do also appreciate Mr. Paquette for bringing this item forward. He essentially sort of put into words something that I was thinking about and hadn't really given much more thought in. As we change how our downtown core looks, and by the need to increase our vitality by bringing in residential units, some of the buildings that have been commercial, have been office space, are now residential units. And so there's a shift and a change to how our downtown looks. We're getting a lot more service businesses at ground level on the side streets that used to be up in the second and third floor in an office building. And maybe office buildings are going the way of the dodo bird. I don't know. I also see the shift if we look over the old Flint co-op gas station at Second or First and Bevan, and think about the other larger pieces of real estate that we have, looking at Save On Foods or Thrifties, and how that will change. So I think this is a very important conversation to have, to make sure that as we are increasing the vitality, to recognize that there is going to be a shift to the types of commercial businesses that are going to be in our core. We are not going to have the large land use owners with the massive space that exist, dwindling right now, but still exist. We've got several tire places and automotive. You know, that day is going to come that that's going to change. And so I look forward to this conversation being brought forward through strategic planning, through the zoning, and looking at the policy of how we're going to be as a community, and what is going to be, what types of businesses will be where they will be. We're not dictating and mandating the types, I shouldn't say that, but it's going to be different, and we need to be prepared for that change. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fellett. I'll turn to any colleagues if there's any further comment on the correspondence from Mr. Paquette. Seeing none, we have received that as part of our process tonight. Did you have another item, Councillor O'Keefe?
Would it be appropriate to comment on something we heard in public participation?
Absolutely.
Okay. So I just wanted to respond to Mrs. O'Brien's comments, because I appreciate her bringing forward the information about the needs of the over 85 population. And I just wanted to acknowledge that, heard what she said. I think in terms of some of the specific things that were brought up in terms of, in her correspondence about different facilities for seniors, some of those things I think are things that local government won't have a lot of control over in terms of health issues and facilities. It's an island health thing. In terms of things like the community gardens, and I think there was a concern about that we were just going to encourage them. And my response to that is, everybody I think thinks that those are a good idea, but I think we're challenged by space within the town of Sydney. So we can't commit to that we're actually going to have a community garden if we don't know that we have space. The same thing with the secondary suites and coach houses. We can't force people to put those things on their property. So I think the wording in the OCP to say that we will encourage or consider those things are appropriate. So I just want to comment on those things to let her know that we heard what she said, and that's kind of how I see us responding to those things. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Keefe. Councillor Duncan.
Thank you. I think I'll just clarify about the community gardens that Councillor O'Keefe brought up. It's not that we never have no space identified. Part of the Parks Master Planning was to ask the community whether there were parks where we thought we could dedicate some community garden space. The issue is actually that if we said established, it would make the town have to do it, and then we would have to hire town staff to build them and maintain them. So until we have a community group that wants to come forward with people who say that they're willing to maintain community gardens, if anyone has ever had a garden before, they know they are a lot of constant work, then I'm sure the town would be quite happy to help find space and possibly be able to donate things in kind, and help with the establishment of it. It's been discussed before, but in terms of actually taking the initiative to be the ones who would build them and maintain them and plant them and grow the food and things like that, that's not something that the town has the capacity to do unless there's a dedicated community group who's willing to do it.
Thank you, Councillor Duncan. So thank you for addressing that item of public participation. Does council have any other items they wish to raise or wish to move forward with a motion to give third reading?
I'll move third reading as amended.
Second.
We haven't moved and seconded. Any discussion? Councillor Garn?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I'll just, I won't support it because I don't support Schedule B. And I just want to elaborate a little bit, if I may. Just that as far as, you know, allowing 5 and 6 stories in certain areas and saying that that doesn't necessarily have to happen, my position is we don't know what the council of the day will be when a project comes forward and what their leanings or tendencies will be. So that troubles me. And also with regards to zoning amendments, I've seen previous developments be approved with using the current OCP as a rationale. So that is also problematic for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Garnett. Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you. I'm supportive of this OCP. There are things in it that I wish had gone another way in certain neighborhoods or developments or things. But I think with an OCP, it's never going to be perfect. There will always be people that say we should have gone, further in this, putting focus on this. There's people that will say we didn't go far enough. But I think overall, I can say that I'm happy with this. I think it's an improvement. I think it's a good guide for us for the coming year. And yeah, maybe it doesn't have everything that we would all like to do. And as I say, some of the things that I don't necessarily agree with, but I think the council had a good discussion on those items, and the community had lots of opportunities for engagement. So I'm happy to support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Duncan.
Thank you. I'm happy to support it as well, but I thought since it is an election year and we were talking about the OCP, which was the largest thing that I know a lot of people on this council said we were going to get done for this, I thought I should bring up, in light of what Councillor Garnett just said about not being able to trust that the councils of the day will see it that way. And we heard this a number of times, that this is a fear that has come up about the OCP process. And, people feeling generally satisfied with the process that went on and what went into it, but still being worried that there's some flexibility, some things that were not completely, some eventualities that we had not completely cut off from the potential for happening. And I think it's actually good, right? We can't actually control what future citizens and how future residents are going to feel about their town. Like 10 years from now, many of us may not be here anymore. There will be new people who may have new values, new approaches. They may be facing utterly different living situations that at this point we can't even imagine. And making sure that we have the kind of flexibility that actually does ensure that the councils of later days can meet their own needs according to how their citizens have voted, hopefully voted them in from a selection of candidates who they felt could adequately represent them. And so I feel this is one of those things where in a democracy, making sure that the next slate of candidates that are put forward out of the general public, therefore hold many of the values we think that the townspeople represent, is on the general public, making sure we encourage people to run, and making sure that we continue communicating with everyone who does run and who gets into office, how they want this document to continue to be used, and how they would like it to be implemented as it goes. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Duncan. Councillor Wainwright.
Thank you, Mayor. So I'm happy to support this OCP going forward. It's not perfect, but it is way, way better than the OCP that we've currently got. And the big problem with the previous OCP was just that it was too open to interpretation. And in that respect, while we're not completely prescriptive to the level that some people want, it is not ambiguous in the things that matter. I mean, there's even a very clear map of the heights that are permitted throughout our downtown. In the previous OCP, there is an illustration of the concept. It's not even a map, it's just an illustration of the concept. So that kind of thing is completely gone. With respect to the OCP not going far enough, one of the good things about how council has approached it is they have left the door open for those things happening in future. They haven't gone in a different direction that closes to the door to those sort of future initiatives. So I think that's good. It sets the stage. With respect to the concern that perhaps we need to lock things down more because we're concerned about a future council. So I've been around a bit, and I recall a council that simply chose to amend the OCP. It didn't say what they wanted, and they had the majority, and it didn't matter what people said in the public hearing. After all, they had the majority. So the point I'd make is locking down the OCP as tight as you possibly want is not as important as making sure you elect a good council. So that would be the message I'd leave you with. Look hard at who you elect, and I wouldn't sweat trying to lock down the OCP and think it's going to protect you forever. You elect a bad council, it's no protection at all.
Thank you, Councillor Wainwright. I'll turn to Councillor Fallett.
Thank you very much. Although I supported Councillor Garnett in his motion that was not supported by the rest of council, and I believe that there is good reason to have supported this motion. Be that as it may, I'm not going to deny support of the OCP in general because of that. I think, and it has nothing to do with the timeline and we must get this done in our term, has nothing to do with it. I think we perhaps have gone as far as we can. And if another council comes along and feels that there need to be adjustments, then so be it. That is up to another council to do. I think we've taken this to the best of our abilities, and that it's better than the other. Well, I should certainly hope so, that it's better than the other one. But here we are. So I'm happy to support it, and we'll go from there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fallett. Councillor Wintoul.
Thank you, Mayor. And I'm happy to support the motion and the OCP moving forward, and perhaps a slightly different perspective than was just shared from Councillor Fallett. In my case, I do think it's important that we see some finality in this process, knowing again that it's not perfect, but knowing that we've invested significant amount of this community's time, of staff's time, and consultants' time and funding in developing what has been, I think, a very well received OCP. And thankfully, this community really participated and really provided insight and input into the process, and this council listened. We've seen changes that were made through this process as a direct result of residents coming forward and expressing their concerns, and I'm appreciative of their participation and their passion for the community. And like my colleagues who've spoken, yeah, this is a situation that we'll see future councils, govern, and your choices, of course, in terms of who's at council are extremely important. So again, I thank the residents for their participation, and I'm happy to support the motion on the table. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Rintoul. Seeing no further speakers, I'll call the question on third reading. All in favor? Opposed? One opposed. Councillor Garnett. The motion carries.
I'll move adoption.
Second.
We have it moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? One opposed. Councillor Garnett. The motion carries. Thank you, Council. I will turn to Section 5B, which is our Parks Amendment number 7 to our, Parks Bylaw number 2238, Amendment number 7. We have considered and given for early readings to the bylaw, and we have a recommendation.
I'll move adoption.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? None opposed. The motion carries. Thank you. We'll turn to Section 7. Under 7A, we have the minutes from our regular council meeting of June 13th.
Move adoption.
Second.
Any errors, omissions, or discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? None opposed, motion carries. And we have the minutes from our special council meeting of June 20th.
Move adoption. Second.
Moved and seconded. Any errors, omissions, or discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Motion carries. Thank you. I'll turn to Mayor's report. I just have remarks that I decided to make with regards to the OCP because it wasn't particularly to amendments or that process, but I wanted to take a moment to firstly acknowledge our Senior Manager of Long Range Planning, Mr. Corey Newcomb, who is the project lead for the official community plan. This was an enormous project, the largest project that I have seen in 20-some years that I've lived in Sydney. And I want to thank Mr. Newcomb for his leadership. I want to thank all staff throughout the organization who contributed and participated. I want to thank colleagues on council for the listening that we did, for the engagement that we did, for the amendments that we made to the draft, for the deliberations. And I think most importantly, I want to thank members of the public, and I am sorry that some have left. But I want to thank members of the public because I think our council, myself and my colleagues, clearly stated at the beginning of this process that we would not consider ourselves successful in this process unless we had had good engagement with the community, because what we have done, I believe, is we have come up with a shared vision for the future of our community. And the only way we can do that is through the engagement from communities. So the individual residents, the businesses, the many community organizations that provided input was all valuable. It was essential to us having a good process and getting to what I think is an excellent planning document for the future, and will help see our vision through as a community. I also want to acknowledge Modus Planning, Design, and Engagement, who are consultants on this project and worked closely with Mr. Newcomb and other staff. I will now turn to Councillor Garnett, our liaison to the Sydney Museum and Archives, for a verbal update, a verbal report.
Thank you, Mayor. It's very brief. I anticipated a longer meeting, so I kept it really short. The last board meeting was June 18th. Wanted the public to know they're now open 7 days a week. I attended the Suitcase Project Artist Talk on May 29th. It was moderated very well by the Education and Outreach Coordinator. There was a presentation provided by the artist, and then there was a question and answer period. It was quite informative. And I had mentioned at the board meeting that I had hoped that they would do similar things in the future because I thought it was very valuable. And I believe that that's kind of their intent going forward. So keep your ears open for things like this going on in the future. That particular exhibit will end on July 4th, so you have another week to go to it. I recommend you do. It's a very it's well done, and it's a good learning experience. I'll put it that way. And I want to start promoting on July 8th. The next exhibit starts, and it's called The Little Black Dress, or LBD, or as it's referred to, or La Petite Robe Noire. It comes from the Costume Museum of Canada in Winnipeg, and it explores the 80 years of the little black dress and how it's used throughout fashion history in Canada. And it's not really something I'm up on. I'm not really a fashion guru of any sense. I only know I've got it right if my wife lets me leave the house the way I'm dressed. So the good news on this thing is the exhibit the costs of it were completely covered by a grant that they got from Museums Assistance Program, Exhibition Circulation Fund. So even though the staff turnover has continued and we have a brand new staff there, they're working very diligently and they're still successful in grant applications. So this is good news all around. Their donations for the month of May were greater than April, so they're still on excellent plan and position to reach their goal for the budget year on their donation end. And that's it. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Garnett. If I could have a motion to receive the verbal report.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor? Motion carries. Thank you. We'll now turn to staff reports, and under item 13A, we have the 2021 Annual Municipal Report. Mr. Humble, are we having an introduction this evening?
I can do it very briefly, Mr. Mayor. So this is the 2021 Annual Report for Council's consideration. It's required to undertake through legislation. We've done the required notice in terms of the statutory requirements for the notice for the annual report. It has been prepared by the administration department, and it does include our audited annual financial statements for year ended December 31st, 2021. It includes departmental reports respecting municipal services and operations. There's a progress report on 2021 municipal objectives and initiatives for 2022, as well as a progress report on priorities contained within the town's strategic plan.
Thank you, Mr. Humble. We'll turn to council. We did have an item of correspondence and a speaker who addressed council this evening on the annual report. We could turn to that, or we do have a recommendation. Councillor, sorry, I don't have split vision. Councillor O'Keefe, then Councillor Garnett.
Okay, a question through you to staff on the report. So what I always find interesting in the annual report is all the metrics on the number of things that we did. And what I'm wondering is whether in subsequent reports we might be able to provide information like those metrics from the prior year, or just to provide greater sort of context and understanding. So when I see that, 330 things got done, or I think that's a lot. I don't know, but so having some historic information on here's what we did in the last few years kind of helps us put in context whether we've got a lot of things on the go, whether things are increasing. So whether that's something that might be able to be incorporated in future reports.
Through the mayor to Councillor O'Keefe. So perhaps we can look at that. I know that each and every sort of annual report that staff undertakes, I think we look to try to make improvements. There is I think a relatively standardized template that's followed by local governments in terms of creating their annual reports. Again, it's really there to meet our statutory requirements. It's a good document, obviously, for council, for the community, to look at what's been undertaken in the previous year. So we can look at that and see if there's if it's possible to do that. But you know, as I said, we try to follow a fairly standard template in doing that. But we can look at it because we
Okay.
are striving to make improvements each and every time.
Thanks. And another one, sort of related to that, and I can't remember if we talked about this at the last annual report, or maybe it was strategic planning, but in terms of metrics, maybe for the fire department as well, if there's a way for them to round that out a little bit more. I know there's some municipalities give, you know, break it down on the number of calls, the number of first responders. I guess there's a variety of different categories. And the only reason I'm thinking about that is we've previously talked about perhaps the need for additional staffing or resources for the fire department in the future. So I'm just thinking it would be easier for council and the public to understand those needs if we could kind of see the progression or the types of things that they're responding to. So just a suggestion if that's something that's doable.
Through the mayor to Councillor O'Keefe, I can certainly pass that along to the fire chief. Usually the fire department has no issues or problems filling up content with respect to the annual report, but I can certainly pass that along.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Garnett.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, just with reference to the letter and the public speaker, I would actually like a status update on those two things. Is that something that staff can do, or do you think that's onerous?
Through the mayor to Councillor Garnett, I don't think it's something that we can do this evening in terms of a status update, in terms of, you know, bringing something forward on those items and providing a more comprehensive update. I think that's something that maybe we can look to, maybe as we get closer to strategic planning or coming out of strategic planning, we can look at that. But yeah, I don't think it's something that we necessarily can look to do imminently within the next couple of months, but maybe post or pre-strategic planning perhaps.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mayor.
If I could just add a comment to that. I think, you know, we have done 4 strategic plans during this term, and we've adapted the process a little, but now that we have a current OCP, we'll have a current climate action plan. We have the Parks Master Plan and the Urban Forest Strategy approved earlier this term. That I see it incumbent on us to be referring to those documents, consulting those documents as council members as we're going into the strategic planning session, in a way that we perhaps haven't done because the OCP was of an older date, and that we have seen the staff reports that come forward to us in preparation for strategic plan. There's a detailed assessment of capital projects. There's a detailed assessment of outstanding council action items, which are numerous initiatives that were put forward by council resolution. And so I see that as part of the process. So I do appreciate the recommendation, or the request, and I see that being accommodated through our strategic planning process, which precedes the budgeting process, and informs the budgeting process. So I'll turn back to Councillor Garland if you wish, or
No, I just thought
for
it
the
was
comment.
relevant to bring forward. So.
no. Thank you for that. Councillor O'Keefe, did you have your hand?
Yes, so I think I appreciate this coming forward in terms of having updates on the parks plan and urban forest strategy. And as you mentioned, Mayor, we have other things like now the climate action plan, and we're going to have an active transportation plan, and we're going to have an economic development strategy. So I think it's a good time, maybe at strategic planning, to re-look at how do we hold ourselves accountable to all these things. And I know that staff do their best to review these things and decide, okay, well, we're going to do this, that, and the other thing in the parks plan this year. But I think a way to maybe formalize that, and for us to be able to communicate more clearly to the public that we undertook a climate action plan, and this is what we're doing, and we've undertaken the parks plan, and so a way to report out on those things. So I'm not sure what that looks like, but maybe, as you say, something that we can have more discussion about at strategic planning.
Thank you for mentioning the word, if I may comment,
Yeah.
for mentioning the word accountable. We have a process, and you know, we rely on staff information as we go into strategic planning, and we have our priorities as elected representatives that we bring forward, whether it was the first year of our term or as we progress through the term. But we are held accountable by the citizens, and tonight the citizens have come forward and made a request that you know, with specific information on 2 of our significant plans, and so the public is holding us accountable in terms of how we proceed and move forward. So, thank you. So, is there any further questions of staff on the annual report, or we don't have a motion yet to receive
I'll move the
or be
recommendation.
approved? Sorry.
I'll move the recommendation that the Town of Sydney 2021 annual report be approved as presented.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? The motion carries unanimous. Thank you. That concludes our business for this evening. On our agenda, I would seek a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Motion carries. Thank you, council. Thank you, staff, and thank you to members of the public.